Dear Shredder is recorded by the Newsstand Studio at Rockefeller Center in the heart of Manhattan and is part of the Swell Season Surf Radio Podcast Network.
Put aside the everyday world and come with us into the realm of imagination, the middle ground between light and shadow.
Hello, and this is Tyler Brewer of the Swell Season Surf Radio Network, and we are introducing a new series to our podcast network called Dear Shredder. It's an advice podcast on shredding and mental health. Basically, the show is hosted by Matt L. Rohr, who is a licensed psychotherapist practicing here in New York City. And the idea of the show really is to explore mental health issues in the surf, skate, and action sports communities. The aim is also to help in reducing stigma around mental illness, mental health care, and just really make everyone a little bit more aware of the things that we are all kind of going through. The show is an advice podcast, so you can submit anonymous questions and Matt will answer anything that you have. You can go and follow him at Dear Shredder on Instagram, and there is a link in there to submit any sort of questions. Again, everything will be anonymous. We felt this was like a really important show to add to our roster as we are all coming out of COVID. Many of us are struggling with mental health issues. I, for one, am definitely someone who has had their struggles, and being able to talk to someone, being able to know that I'm not alone and that there are other people who are experiencing similar things has helped in my recovery and also making myself better and making better choices for my life. So I think this is going to be a really welcome addition to our network. You can follow it on all the different streaming platforms, so you'll be able to find Dear Shredder. But we are also going to be airing it on Swell Season for the coming future. So we hope you enjoy the show. And we should also give a disclaimer that listening to this podcast does not constitute as therapy or mental health care. If you or someone you know are having a mental health emergency, please dial 911 or go to the emergency room. But we will also list different resources at the end of the podcast and in the notes for you if you need any of that information, which is definitely important and will be helpful. Thank you, and we'll get on with the show now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dear Shredder, an advice podcast exploring mental health issues in the surf and skate communities, brought to you via Swell Season Surf Radio. I'm your host, Matt Rohr. I'm a licensed psychotherapist practicing in New York City. I want to give a quick disclaimer. Listening to this podcast does not constitute therapy or mental health care. If you or someone you know is having a mental health emergency, dial 911 or go to the nearest emergency room. And we're going to list some resources for affordable therapy at the end of the podcast. So I'm super excited to be here today with one of my mentors, Atash Yaghmaian. So Atash has more than a decade of experience working in New York City public schools and has provided social and emotional support for urban youth who've struggled with poverty, injustice, and abuse. After graduating with a master's degree from Hunter College's School of Social Work in 2005, she received a certification in clinical hypnotherapy in 2007 and became a Reiki master. Atash currently practices a mixture of these modalities in her private practice, and she was the director of wellness and founding member of Harvest Collegiate's high school social work program. And I just want to say that Atash is one of my mentors. I've learned a lot about what I do from her, and she's been incredibly generous to me throughout my journey to becoming a therapist. So I'm just super humbled and honored to have you here, Atash.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you start off and just tell us a little bit about what you currently do?
Okay. Well, maybe I should say a little bit about myself because you said all my credentials, but I'm
Sure.
originally from Iran. I came to America when I was 19 years old. From Iran, I kind of ran away from home, ran away from an arranged marriage. And I came to America and I wanted to go to college and study sociology, and then I found psychology eventually, and that was the beginning. But I started as an undocumented immigrant in America, and like going to college was such a privilege. So that's a little bit about me, and professionally, right now, I am mostly in private practice. As you mentioned, I've been in education for almost 20 years, which is a long time, as a social worker in the schools. But alongside, I also been keeping my private practice, which I work with a lot of trauma survivors. People who have childhood traumas mostly, and do hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, Reiki. So I use different methods to help different people. And I also write about mental health. I'm a writer. I'm working on a memoir, but I also write a lot of short pieces about different things that people ask me about. So I put it out there for everyone to read.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about how your experience coming to the U.S. has shaped your practice as a therapist?
Sure, of course. One of the things, as you know, I had a lot of interns for social work. One of the things I always tell them.
I was one of them.
You were one of them. And qualification is really important. Education is really important. Those are incredible to keep learning and developing ourselves. But being qualified by experience, it's incredible too. Because sometimes you can read about everything and learn about everything, but if you don't have necessarily certain experiences, I don't know, it's just it has a different impact when people feel like you come from an experience, even though you don't share your experience, but they can feel you understand. So being an immigrant, being dyslexic, being growing up in violence and getting away from it and finding a new way of living, all those things. If I have clients who are dealing with those things, it's very natural for me to relate to them, and they relate to me without even knowing my story. So it's an incredible thing that happens.
Was there a particular reason you were drawn to work with young people in schools?
I think I always liked young people because they're such incredible energy. But when I actually really think about it, it's like I wanted to save the inner teenager in me. But I didn't know that at the time. I just had to put myself through different situations and connect to them, and then remember, and then therefore work on the things I needed to work on. So working with teenagers was so powerful because sometimes I would relate to some of their stories that would either trigger me in a way that would recall a memory that I had to work on it myself. So I constantly got to work on me because of what I was dealing with. And it's just what an incredible job to have, that the growth of your clients also helps you to grow too.
This is a podcast that's mostly listened to by surfers and skateboarders. So you and I have had the privilege of working with some of the same skateboarders actually back in the school. But I wanted to just talk about your experience working with those groups of people. If there's anything that kind of struck you about working with surfers or working with skaters, anything that stuck out in your work, anything sort of unique or special about working with those populations.
I just, actually, yes, because I loved how much life, like it was like a life force. They always were chasing thrills. So it's like in that way, I really related to them. And, whether it was like catching the wave or like, like being skating. And so there's something about that they had all in common, which I really loved. And that vitality, really. And sometimes that could be healthy, and sometimes it can be unhealthy too.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how can it be healthy, and when can that pursuit be unhealthy?
Sure. So it's healthy because it's like full of life and excitement, and it's being alive, right? Like it's an example of being alive and being out there in nature or connecting to others. So in that way, it's really positive. But I guess it could be unhealthy if you're chasing that kind of excitement because you're running away from past experiences or denying some past experiences, which some people do it through, thrills, or some people do it through like, substances. It could, turn to something else. So I'm always curious to find out what they're getting out of it and in what ways it's not working, what ways works and what ways doesn't work. And for everyone is different, obviously.
Right. I remember you saying like years ago, I remember you saying something about there being like working with clients who were surfers and finding that it was like a really healthy outlet for them. And then when it didn't work anymore, like if going surfing wasn't giving them the kind of like release or escape that they needed, when it like wasn't cutting it in terms of managing their anxiety or depression or whatever it was, then that could be really hard. Do you remember this conversation? Do you remember what I'm talking about?
I actually do. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have such a good memory, Matt. I think this was like 3 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago.
We were talking about my favorite thing. So
yes. I guess anything in life, right? Like while it works is great. When it doesn't work and we insist and going after it, expecting the same result, but it's not giving us the same result, it creates, it can be problematic. But oftentimes, like, I don't know, I think you're talking about the person I'm thinking about, one of our own students. I think if you're thinking about that person, I remember he wanted to explore something else completely, but he was scared to start something new. And he wanted to stick to something he already knows, but he really wanted to try other things.
Yeah.
So I think that was what we were working on, to explore new things, and that's okay. And he doesn't have to be good at it. He could start as a beginner.
Right.
And not be so good at it, but eventually maybe he would find a different outlet, and that's okay.
I think there's a thing with like skaters and also with surfers where it like becomes such a part of your identity and who you are. It's like, I'm a surfer, I identify as a surfer. And then it's like 15 degrees and the surf is kind of crappy and you just don't want to go, but then you feel like you're not a real surfer if you don't go,
Totally.
or like whatever, you're like the example you just gave, like your interests shift and you want to work on something else, or your focus sort of changes. And then it's like all of a sudden your identity is like under threat or something.
Right.
Yeah. I can really relate to that. Especially in New York. Well, I just have that same thing. Like I have that same, that feeling of like, oftentimes in the winter when I'm trying to psych myself up to go surfing when it's like to like dig the car out of the snow and like go to the beach and it's like, kind of an internal battle. And I'm like, come on, are you a surfer or not? Or whatever. Or with skating, it's like, I like hurt my foot a couple months ago and I like haven't really been skating as much because I got like a little scared. I'm getting like, I'm almost 40. Should I really even be doing this still? But I don't want to give it up either. Like it's like something I love. But also it's like a part of my identity. I feel like I'll still feel like I'm a skater when I'm like 70 and I don't skate anymore, but I'll just be like one of those people who tries to talk to the skaters and is like, I used to skate up a hideout in the 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
But
they're definitely my favorite people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Because of that thrill, I don't know, that source of life and vitality. I'm really into it.
I have a theory that skaters are like really probably, I guess this would probably be the same for anyone who's engaged in like physical creative expression, like a dancer or like maybe a musician. But I just think skaters are like really creative, like multifaceted creative people.
And now a quick commercial break.
All right, cool. Well, should we jump into some of these questions?
Sure, I would love to. Yes.
All right. So our first question is from a 39-year-old skateboarder who lives in Greenpoint. Dear Shredder, my mom hurt my feelings deeply last spring. Since then, I've tried explaining my feelings a few times in person, by text, and by email. She's tried to resume having casual conversations a few times. I recently told her I don't feel comfortable with that since she hasn't acknowledged my feelings and she just repeated her pattern of trying to talk about other shit. I believe strongly in restorative justice and have used it to help repair harm in community settings, but I've never been in this position. If I tell her I need an apology or if I coach her through repairing the harm, it would then feel fake or empty. I also recognize she probably doesn't have these tools or practice with this stuff, and we've never talked about our feelings until now. How should I proceed? Sincerely, Hurt.
Wow. Well, I would say that it's very beautiful that he wants to have a connection with his mom and he wants to try, that you want to try to resolve some of the issues. That's definitely a beautiful thing. I guess what I would suggest is figuring out what, so the intention seems really beautiful, right? So
yeah,
to checking and see like if you could come from a very vulnerable place and really explain why you're hurt instead of looking for apology, because people who are I don't know, parents sometimes might get defensive and kind of like you lose the conversation there. But if you come from a vulnerable place, it's very disarming quality. And it can totally shift the conversation in a different place. And it sounds like Hurt has done that in some ways. But I would just say to stick with being vulnerable and really explaining why he's hurt and that he really needs acknowledgement for the hurt, but not necessarily, he doesn't even care for apology, but he really needs the acknowledgement.
What do you think it would like? What does it look like to come at the conversation from like a place of vulnerability rather than like focusing on I need an apology? Like how would it sound? Okay. How would it sound different? Like what are the two different like approaches? Like how would they look?
Okay, so it would be like if I had to do that for like to my mom, for example, or like I would be like, Mom, like I really care about our relationship, and for the past, I don't know how old is he, let's say 30, 40 years, our relationship has been like this, and the next 30, 40 years, I really want to have a different relationship with you. And
Mhm.
the reason I keep bringing this up, it's because I want to have a better relationship with you. And I want us to be able to talk to one another about things that bothers us.
Mhm.
And and sometimes I feel like I need acknowledgement, and my need for acknowledgement hasn't been met. It's not that I want. You don't have to do anything, but I just want to be heard. So, like when you did this and this and this, it affected me this way and that way. I just want you to hear me out on it. And oftentimes they will be more open to it. And if you still feel like they haven't heard it, they haven't heard or then I would be like, can you repeat back to me what you heard I say? And then they have to repeat it, and that's kind of like a acknowledgement, and maybe that's enough for that day. And then you could start again next time a little bit more, right?
Yeah, I'm hearing you say like naming, like kind of starting off by naming your intention to let them know that you're not there to like fight or criticize. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Like
And
your
then you're making an
intention is,
ask, like, I would just like this. I would like for you to hear or acknowledge this thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. I really agree, like, that it's, I was just kind of struck by this letter, like the fact that they've never talked about their feelings.
yeah,
And that this person is now deciding to address their mom like really directly about, we don't know what happened, but about something that they're clearly really hurt by is like super brave,
it
you know. And it's
is.
really hard to go from like 20 or 40 years or whatever, 38 years of a certain type of relationship and say, you know what, I really want, I want this other thing from you. So I just want to name how like scary that must be, you know.
Yeah, and very brave, as you said.
Yeah, I almost want
And
oh, go ahead.
I wish he was here. I wish he was here and we could ask him questions.
What would you ask him?
I just want to like more about their history. Also, like I was thinking, if after trying to talk to mom and mom doesn't respond well and doesn't soften up or tries to understand where he's coming from, maybe he could step back for a little while and try again later, or write a letter, a really sincere from the heart letter, and send.
Yeah.
So that way, like mom will have to read it and will
Hmm.
see what he's trying to say.
Yeah, it sounds like he tries to say what it sounds like he tries to express his feelings, and mom kind of, her way of respond, like she just kind of tries to act like everything's normal. And I think you're right, like writing a letter would be a way to at least know that he's gonna get to say what he needs to say.
Yeah. And sometimes I also suggest like people write a letter for
Hmm.
themselves so they know what they're going to say. And when they get to the meeting, they can also read the letter and say, Mom, I really need to say something and it's really hard for me. And I just want you to really hear me out. So can I read the letter to you?
Right.
It can also be that way, like whatever works. The point, and constantly reminding that the point of this is for us to get closer, because I want that. I want us to be closer.
What if you, like, I get the sense from this letter that the person is, you know, that it's like hard for mom to do this. Like mom, it sounds like he's been trying and mom has just sort of tried to go on
Yeah.
business as usual. So what do you recommend in the situation like where mom doesn't respond? You know, mom doesn't, maybe he writes the letter or has the conversation and maybe she makes an attempt to hear him, but ultimately I just get the sense that, you know, sometimes people can be set in their ways and might not be likely to change drastically. So what happens when he doesn't get the response he wants? How does he kind of navigate his relationship with his mom?
Well, that's a really good question, Matt. I really identify with the this letter and this
Yeah.
person because I had to go through the same situation with my mom. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say like persistence is really important. Like if you really
Yeah.
want this, and as long as our parents are alive and we want have a different relationship with them, keep
Mm-hmm.
trying.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely suggest it. But I
Mhm.
also believe like sometimes it's really hard and it's good to step back and like don't communicate for a while. And if they reach out and why aren't you communicating, and say, because I really want to get close to you and I don't want to have the same relationship of like not us really connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to connect, there are things like I want to hear from you and I want to tell you. So like it took me like 10 years of try to be able to reach my mom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't wish that upon anyone. Like hopefully like, you know, after one try or 3 tries, like you can get there. But sometimes, you know, it might take 10 years. But if he really wants it, I really admire it. And persistence usually pays off. And using different tactics, you know, like, but come from a very vulnerable place and just keep it to I statements and like not get into like accusing or, you know.
Right. I want to ask one more question about this letter. Like, what I was just what something popped up for me when you were saying, you know, like come from a vulnerable place. That this person sounds like they've been hurt by their mom, and their efforts to kind of connect haven't been met openly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you deal with how does one deal with the sort of like defensiveness, you know, that pops up with like he might feel like I just, you know, like I don't want to be vulnerable to her because she's not going to meet my needs. So how do you kind of work with your own fear or defensiveness in terms of like opening up to someone who doesn't meet your needs and hasn't met your needs for a really long time?
Right. Well, his desire to have resolution with his mom, it
Mm-hmm.
seems to me, is greater than anything else right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how it feels to me, that desire is pretty incredible. And if as long as that desire is there, patience and persistence, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, he probably will not be able to change his mom, but he can change the way he relates to his mom,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And he can say his piece and walk away, and again come back and say his piece and walk away. The hope is that she will get it and she will give him what he wants, but the reality is she might not.
Right.
But at least he has able to communicate. He has been able to communicate his needs, and he have given a voice to a younger him. And it's a very empowering experience, nevertheless.
I'm just thinking about how like the being able to like put being able to articulate what he's feeling will likely feel like he doesn't have to hold it anymore. Like he maybe has some anger, and not that his anger is going to magically disappear when he speaks to his mom, but he doesn't have to like hold. He doesn't now. It's like it's out in the
Unburden himself.
open, and he kind of
Exactly. Yeah.
has like lofted it up. Yeah, exactly. And it's not just
Totally.
it's not
And
just his
if I was
burden,
working with
the
him, I would give
difficulty in the
him the sets of
relationship.
cards I have, cards like you've seen those cards, feelings and needs. And I would really like process all his feelings, like whatever they are, sadness, anger, frustration, you know, like maybe guilt, who knows, other feelings. And then all the needs that hasn't been met. We hear the need for acknowledgement hasn't been met, you know, that's a huge need, but maybe there are other needs that he could communicate. Again, part of healthy relationship is us being able to communicate our needs and feelings. And not worrying about the result necessarily. We might not get the result we want, but at least that the part that we communicated, it unburdens us. And the others at the other side, they our parents or the people we're trying to resolve our relationship with, they also hear our intention it's positive.
My sense is that if he tries some of these interventions that you're suggesting, that that it won't change overnight,
It
but
takes
that
time.
sometimes people
It
just have
takes
to kind of
time.
like chew on things for, like you said, for years maybe. But yeah.
Totally. I am a big believer. There is always a way. We just have to find it. There is always a way. Sometimes it's hard to get there, but there's
Yeah.
always a way. I mean, that's the way I try to look at my life when I'm stuck with people or with things, or I always try to remind myself there is a way. I just haven't found that way yet, and I will.
All right. Should we move on to our next question?
Yes, but before we move on, can we take a deep breath and send some love to Hurt?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So this next question is from 45-year-old skateboarder in Cambodia. First of all, shout out to the 45-year-old for still skateboarding.
Yes.
You know, when I was like 25, I remember I moved to New York when I was, I don't know, I think I was 27, and I like kind of got really back into skating when I came back to New York because I wasn't surfing as much. And I really felt I was like an old man skateboarder when I was 27. I was like, I'm way too old to be doing this. And now I'm getting close to 40. And I have a friend my friend PJ is like, he's almost 50 and he skates really, really well. So I'm inspired by all the older skateboarders out there. Okay, so here we go. Dear Shredder, since the pandemic began, I've been trying to deal with a sudden fear of death that I never had before. I was never afraid of dying before this. I thought it would just come and that was it. Now I sometimes get panic attacks where I feel trapped in my body and can't get out. It's like I want to run outside and do something, but you can't run outside your body. Sometimes I close my eyes and imagine I'm dead and can't move anymore, and that I'm trapped in my body, except I can't even move. What should I do? Sincerely afraid.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like he is having a new relationship with mortality, which is very normal after this a few years of pandemic. I think it's a real and intelligent response to question our own mortality at any time, whenever that happens. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a beautiful thing to question those things. And but I guess I would have questions for him, like, has he lost someone who was close to him? Where all these feelings are coming from, like exactly, and in general, what is his relationship to death in the past? I think there's gold here in this, what he's bringing up. I would try to see all of this as an opportunity to learn more about himself and heal. So let me see. So all sorts of things can cause sudden fear of death, right? It could be something personal, like old trauma even returning. You know, like after pandemic, I feel like a lot of people were saying like they are recalling things they have forgotten about. So that could be it. It could be something collective. Since as a society we are experiencing a lot of similar things, so much of death around us. So I would want to know all those things first.
I'm thinking about how our culture is just like death is so taboo in American culture, and you know, like we kind of don't talk about. It's like it's like considered a grim subject that you don't talk about, you know. And I think that like the pandemic has just sort of put our mortality in everyone's faces, like, or at least especially early on in New York City, you know, there were like morgue trucks in the parking lot of the hospital, and there were sirens all the time. And it just felt like everyone knew somebody who had died of COVID. And so, yeah, it's like something that I think we don't talk about or look at in our culture. And then all of a sudden it's like here in your face. But I think maybe it's healthy to have it be, I know there are other cultures that like spend time with the dead before, you know, for days before they bury them. And so death maybe isn't so mysterious. And I wonder
It's
about
such a big part
that.
of life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it actually, this reminded me of the time like I was taking these meditation classes, and it was near a cemetery. And our meditation teacher would have us do walking meditation, and would ask us to go outside for like 30 minutes and walk around the cemetery and do a walking meditation without talking to each other, just really just walking and absorbing like we're walking in the cemetery where we're all going to end up. My first reaction was like, wow. But it was such a beautiful thing to be able to think about that and reflect on the fact that our time on earth there's a limitation, and where am I with it, and thought about it. So it was really beautiful. So also it makes me think about dead ends, things that I am blocked, right? Like what else in his life he feels like a dead end for him right now. He feels trapped because the sense I got is that feeling of trapped, right? Sometimes like fearing death is not so much about the physical death, but it's more about the feeling of being stuck or trapped or without options. I would want to know, like, is that what he's feeling, and what about, right? And and no matter what we are feeling, there's always a way to feel better, right? I mean, I'm very optimistic in that way because I believe, you know, as a therapist, I believe we all can get better, and this is why I became a therapist. But it requires some work. It requires courage to talk about it. And it sounds like he's putting himself out there.
Yeah, I almost want him to like, I feel like I have an instinct to, like, if I were to speak with him, to kind of go into the fear more. Like he's saying, I've been dealing with this fear. I never had this fear before. It almost sounds like he wants to sort of like exile the fear. Like he wants the fear to go away.
Instead of examining it.
Yeah. And I almost want him to, want him to find like where the fear sits in his body, and what that fear, when he like really can find it and feel it, like what else comes up, what other thoughts and memories come up.
I love
and really
that.
like kind of go into the fear and see what's there. If he like really explores it and doesn't I also want to like acknowledge that it sounds really like he's panicked and scared. So that sounds really hard. But if there's a way to breathe through it and like really explore the fear and not have to, you know, kind of look at it and see with an attitude of like curiosity and sort of compassion, and see what it's about and what it wants.
Absolutely. He can also write about it, right? Like journaling around it, because all the answers is already within us and within him. And writing about it maybe will put some light on what's going on more.
Should we look at the next question? Do you want to do another? Sure. I liked taking a breath for. Should we take a breath for Afraid as well?
Yes,
let's
of course.
And let's send Afraid some loving energy.
Yes. Thank you
right.
for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Afraid. Okay. So last but not least, we have a 29-year-old surfer from
Okay.
Bushwick. Dear Shredder, if there's one thing I've been able to enjoy during the lockdown, it was solitude. Thankfully, I'm still employed and can occasionally enjoy some surf sessions. To be honest, this period of time has made me realize how much I miss being alone. So this must have been written earlier in the pandemic. Though I haven't seen
Yes.
friends in a month, I've been co-living with roommates and my partner. I barely have time to myself. All I really want is some alone time to get away from the city and social media and be by myself. I'm honestly not that excited to jump back into morning commutes, bars, dinners, and social bullshit that I realize I hated so much. I feel bad for having these feelings, especially with my partner and friends. How can I best justify these feelings to myself without being selfish? Could these feelings be coming from some kind of post-crisis escapism? Is that even a bad thing to desire? Sincerely, Solitudinous.
These are great, Matt. You get such great letters.
I know. Thank you. Thank you to our readers for these questions, to our listeners.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like the
Wow.
first thing that sticks out to me is I feel bad for having these feelings, especially with my partner and friends. And
Right.
I think that you don't have to. I mean, I understand. Like, I think we all feel bad for certain feelings that we have, but you don't need, your feelings aren't hurting anyone, and all feelings are okay to have. So, as much as you can let go of your guilt or shame for having your feelings, you're not harming anyone by feeling that way. And in fact, it's very normal to need space and to not want to be around your friends and partner when you're stuck with them all the time.
Absolutely. I'm actually thinking similar to you right now, that there's nothing to be guilty about. To like, he's finding inner peace, right?
Mhm.
Inner contentment, and that's a really wonderful thing. And also, I hear like it's about self-care, and self-care is not selfish. And a lot of people oftentimes confuse self-care with selfish, which are completely a different thing. And what I'm hearing is like he's noticing his needs for quiet time, and that could be self-care, right? And there's no need to apologize about that.
Right. I think he's going to be a better roommate and partner after having some alone time. Like, taking care of himself will make him a better person to be around. So that's one way to justify his feelings, if he needs to justify them, that it will be, if he's happier and more calm and peaceful, then that's everybody's dream roommate or dream partner.
Yeah, and needing and enjoying time alone is for his own benefit, and also benefits of anyone who comes near him. But well, there's a difference between wanting a healthy solitude and unhealthy isolation. So I would want to know the difference between those two things for him, right? Like, so healthy solitude has joy in it, right? And I get that there is like, he likes it and he doesn't want to go back out there and doing like the rat race or whatever. Like, he doesn't want to participate in like what it used to be. And that seems healthy to me, but unhealthy isolation has a sense of anxiety in it. Fear or hiding from the rest of the world. And I would want to know if he's experiencing that. So I want to process that a little bit more. And unhealthy isolation, I guess, also leads us to like lower self-esteem, right? Feeling bad about ourselves. And healthy solitude leads us to higher self-esteem and feeling incredible about ourselves. So there's a fine line between the two, and I guess I would want to know where he stands.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. To me, this person sounds like very social. Like when they describe their past lives, so like the dinner parties and the the bars, like they sound like they were pretty active, So, and maybe they are saying that they're recognizing like a need for more time by themselves, or even more time with like people who they really care deeply about, like more intimate time.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that like during like since COVID, I've wanted to spend more like intimate time with people who I really care about, or like I want to play music with like 2 or 3 of my friends, or and that like being, I do want to like, I haven't gone back to concerts and things like that. I do want to have that experience because I love it. But like I think that's what I really missed the most, was just being in like small gatherings with people who I love. So it sounds like this person wants more room for himself, but maybe just less of the like sort of, I don't know, social obligations.
Right. But also, like, is he connected to any community? Like, we all need community, right? So is there a community that he feels comfortable in? Because even when there is a healthy solitude, like, we need others and need to feel connected. So it's not necessarily like isolation can sometimes be disconnection, right? So we want to know, can he have a balance of solitude and a community that he feels actually good in, and he feels supported and acknowledged?
Yeah. I want to ask you a question. This
Sure.
is not this wasn't in the plan, so you can tell me. We can cut it if you don't like it. But
Okay.
like related to what you were just saying, I'm fine. Like, you worked in the schools for many years and are now you're doing private practice only.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what it's like, as like working in a school gives you a community, like you're with 500 people a day, you have your colleagues, you have the kids, but like, how do you find, I know that like being a therapist can be, even though you're working with people, it can be like very lonely. It's like you work with your 20-25 clients, and then there's like no one watching you work. You're not bumping into people at the water cooler to talk about the news or whatever. So like, how do you create community? How do you find like support in doing such a solitudinous job?
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that, because I really miss the teachers and my friends at school, and sometimes, like, being in private practice, as you say, it's lonely. Although I love it very much, and it's like back to back. I see people, and then it's done. So now my community I had to look for communities that is not work necessary, but it's like other parts of my life, which is actually good, because that helps us to find out different desires, right? Like, I love writing, so I created a few writing groups that I get to be with people, right? I connected to a lot of my social work interns from the past and do gatherings like together, right? Like, I started this group doing morning pages together, so that we can check in with each other and get on Zoom sometimes and share experiences. So I constantly have to create those environments for myself, because I'm a very social person and I do miss it.
So you have to be a
But
little
it's
more
not
proactive about it.
totally.
Yeah.
Is that something you're worried about?
Yeah, it's definitely something I'm thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Being
feel
proactive.
that, oh, go ahead.
Being proactive is the way to go, I guess. And figuring out what you want to do and ask people to join you. You might have to be the one who leads it, and that's okay.
Yeah. Right. I think
Yeah.
that's what's so special about like, that's one thing that's really special about skating. Surfing like can be a little more cagey, but sometimes in the right environment. But definitely with skating, it's like during the pandemic, I would like go to the park 2 blocks from my house and skate every day. And I like all of a sudden, I wasn't seeing any of my colleagues because everything was on Zoom, but I had all these
Mm-hmm.
buddies who I would skate with, and it was like a really I don't know. Some of them were like teenagers. Some of them were like 40-year-olds. Like we just had like a very like diverse group of skaters, and like it became a little community. I knew I could go there every day at like 2 or 3 and go for a skate, and I would see some of the same people, and that was just really nice. That was like I felt like there was more like
Yeah.
that's just one of the great things about skating is like if you just show up to the same place every day for a week or two, like you're gonna make some friends pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Even if you don't know them and you show up somewhere and start skating with people, do you feel like you can just make friends right away, or?
Yeah, I feel like I think like maybe you're not gonna be best friends, but you're kind of like doing this thing together and like like uh, giving each other props. It's really nice. It's a cool culture. Do you have any last thoughts for surfers, skaters? You kind of got a broad swath of questions today. People scared of death, people feeling isolated and feeling bad about it, people talking to their parents who they're having a hard time with. Is there any like do you have any sort of broad advice for skateboarders and surfers
Um,
of New York City and the world?
well, just I mean, I loved everything I heard today. I feel like they are all doing wonderful things, and keep it up. Again, community communication, and there's always a way. There's always a way. No matter where we are in life, there's always a way out to something better.
I think that's a really good place to stop. Okay. So, for those of you listeners who are looking for therapy in New York City, I just want to mention a couple quick resources. So, public hospitals in New York City all offer therapy for $15 to $20 per session, whether or not you have health insurance. The Kings County Hospital is centrally located, and their behavioral health center offers adult psychotherapy on a sliding scale. There's the Brooklyn Center for Psychotherapy and New Directions, which you can find by Googling Brooklyn Center for Psychotherapy and New Directions. And then I also want to recommend the Ackerman Institute, ackerman.org, which is a clinic that offers sliding scale therapy focused on family work. Our theme music is by Glass. You can find them on Instagram at Glass the Band and on Spotify. If you like the podcast, please tell your friends about it. Leave a review. Give @DearShredder a follow on Instagram. If you have questions for us for a future episode, go to @DearShredder on Instagram, and there's a link there with a form where you can submit your anonymous questions. Thanks again for listening. Bye.